The revolt of the psychological slaves in morals begins in the very principle of resentment becoming creative. Hello and welcome. This is John on behalf of xenotheory.org, and I want to thank you for choosing to be here and accompany me down the rabbit hole where we pursue ideas under the impression that beauty and meaning are found by looking deeper and not further. Today, we are analyzing Aesop's fable titled The Young Crab and His Mother and how it pertains to the distinction between critiquing something versus complaining about something. So, if you have not read the fable, we're going to read it now and dive into the analysis. The Young Crab and His Mother. "Why in the world do you always walk sideways like that?" said a mother crab to her son. "You should always walk straight forward with your toes turned out." "Show me how to walk, mother dear," answered the crab obediently. "I want to learn." So the old crab tried and tried to walk straight forward, but she could walk sideways only, just like her son. And when she wanted to turn her toes out, she tripped and fell on her nose. And the, summarization statement is, do not tell others how to act unless you can set a good example. Solid advice. And I want to dive into some, tangentially related interpretations from this, and then we're going to dive into the main subject of critiquing versus complaining. So, firstly, we see that I would say the mother crab is projecting because she's attaching emotion to her statement of what she believes the world should be like. So, and that's all encapsulated in one word, in two words, should always. So she doesn't say I would suggest you walk with your toes turned out. It might be helpful. It might be more efficient. You might walk better. You might walk faster with your toes turned out, etc. But instead she said, you should always, meaning like there's no room. It's unequivocal. This is how it should be. I think that was an emotional statement in terms of expression from the mother. And I think that was psychological projection on her behalf, meaning she might have been insecure about it. She might have felt some type of way. And then she projected on her, on this smaller crab here and said, you should always do this. Meanwhile, obviously couldn't even do it herself. So that further kind of instantiates the idea of psychological projection and displacement of guilt or shame in some degree. The second thing that kind of stood out to me from this fable was the fact that the child was curious. This child was receptive to these lessons. It was open-minded to the mother's advice, but people learn best at the school of example. So I think that is profoundly true. Nietzsche says in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, let it be his best cure to see with his own eyes him who maketh himself whole. Meaning, when you have a teacher, when you have somebody trying to show you something, when you have somebody trying to express a philosophy or convey an idea or belief or something that's going to help you, or even a piece of data or insight or knowledge, it's best to lead by example. It's best to show the implementation of that knowledge, meaning that your own life experiences are your best credentials, okay? Because if you trace back credentials far enough, it's going to be rooted in somebody's life experience, right? If I get a college degree, or if I get a certification or some sort of accreditation that says I can do this, let's say personal trainer, for example, I'm learning from somebody who probably is a personal trainer or probably has done a lot of research or has lived a life experience in order to teach that. And, like I said, it's just secondhand experience of the world. And we've done a discussion about this in the past with the machine stops and empiricism. Then that's also on this channel. I talked about the importance of firsthand knowledge, meaning that like your own experiences are valid enough to convey expertise. You don't need external validation on, oh, look at this college degree I got, look at this certificate I got, look at this award I got. You don't need external validation. Your life experiences are sufficient as they are. You are an expert in your own circumstances. So if anybody tries to project on you and say, where's your credentials, where's your specification, where's this, that, that's coming from a place of lack. It's coming from a place of insecurity. It could be coming from a place of jealousy. It could be coming from a place of insecurity. So I wouldn't really take that much into account when other people are pressing you for your credentials on something. Again, especially if you have the life experience to validate that. Simple example, practical example. If I'm a personal trainer, or if I want to find a personal trainer, I'm looking to get in shape. I can choose person A who has maybe they have a degree in biomechanics and a personal trainer, specialized nutritionist degree and certified personal trainer, physiologist, whatever. And then but they are out of shape. And then person B, they don't have all the intellectual knowledge on paper, but they've gone from significantly obese to very healthy and fit. You know what I mean? I'll trust person B any day over person A because they have the life experiences. They've consolidated that knowledge, that data into wisdom. They've applied it. They understand the context, the nuances, the application, all of that. So that's why I think people, I agree with the statement that people learn best in the school of example. And that's what we're seeing here with this young crab. He says, yes, I'm willing to learn, but you have to show me first. I don't want you just projecting at me. I don't want you just telling me something that you can't do yourself. So, and then we obviously have the concluding moral here. Don't tell others how to act unless you can set a good example. I think the most important interpretation I want to establish here, it's tangentially related to the story itself, but critiquing versus complaining. So you could look at the mother crab as, I would say complaining that her child couldn't walk in a straight line. And it'll be helpful if I guess determine what I mean by those two words and define them. So in the simplest distinction between them that I can find in my head is that complaining is obviously expressing dissatisfaction with something. You're expressing disconcern, discontentment, you're unsatisfied with it, whatever the scenario is at hand. And critiquing is you're allowed to do that. You express your dissatisfaction or your discontentment with it, but the distinction is you provide an alternative. It is creative. You're saying, I don't like this, let's try this. That's critiquing something. That's positive, okay? That's you're constructing an alternative, okay? So it's positive. It's moving something in the upwards and onward direction. And complaining, it's only negative. It's only taking away. It's only destructive. Also, it's only about you. If you complain about something, it's only saying this hurt my feelings, this triggered something within me, and you're forcing the conversation to turn. Everybody who's in the conversation, whether it's at a public event or whether it's just online or something, or even if it's one-on-one, you're forcing everybody to turn their mental energy inwards to your emotional state. Okay, and that is extremely selfish. And if you were critiquing something, you're saying, hey, I don't like that because whatever your justification for it not liking it is, that's fine. But here's an alternative. Here's what I think would work a little bit better. And as we know, the mother crab didn't do that. She was only complaining because she said, you shouldn't walk this way, but she couldn't provide a better alternative. So therefore, she was only complaining, not critiquing something. And we implicitly know this with like titles. So you have titles such as art critic or movie critic, right? They say, oh, they might analyze the plot or the themes or the characters or the moral of the story or something. There's no such thing as a art complainer or a movie complainer. They don't say, oh, I just hate this movie, and they just leave it there, right? I can actually think of a autobiographical example. When I learned this distinction, you realize how, I guess, absurd it is when people go around doing this in real life. I was at a event, a in-person discussion for a meetup group in New York City, and we were discussing 12 Rules for Life from Jordan Peterson. And at this time, Peterson was entirely brand new to me. I knew nothing about his philosophy, nothing about his really anything, his psychology, his insights, his beliefs, but especially I knew nothing about his political affiliation. And that's kind of how you can say, rose to fame. He had somewhat controversial views on some bill, and it's a whole different topic. Anyways, we were having a discussion based on his book, which is Competent Psychological Advice. So we were having this discussion, and then somebody was at the discussion, and they were extremely, I don't really know what word to use. I would say triggered or offended or something that he was a subject of conversation. And we were going over analysis of like the chapter, and we were going over questions or feedback or input or something. And then I was moderating the group, and then this gentleman said, oh, I'm offended. I don't like this. And like, everybody was waiting for an additional response or like a supplementary comment. Like, I don't like this. I think this is better. No, it wasn't. He didn't supply that constructive criticism. It was just a complaint. It was saying, I'm offended. I think what he said is this. I think that's that. That makes me feel this way. And again, that made the entire conversation, all the constituents, all the participants of that conversation subject to focus on his emotional internal world, which is, I think it's ridiculous to put it bluntly. And it's very selfish Because like I said, it's only focusing on yourself. Whereas if you're critiquing something, if he said, I'm offended, I don't agree with him here, I think he should take this into consideration, I think he should do this, I think this is a better alternative, that's a completely different line of conversation. That's fruitful. It invites inquiry into the line of conversation. Whereas complaining, it stops inquiry, right? It's going to say, this is my emotional wall, I'm triggered, but it's not adding anything to the world. That person could have just said nothing in that comment, and the conversation would have been just as fruitful and flowing as it had been prior to that comment of, I'm offended, I'm triggered, whatever he added to the conversation. So there is a distinction that I want to make here as well, that there's the possibility of what I would call pseudo critiquing, meaning that you are establishing something, you're establishing an idea, you're establishing a principle or a belief or something, but it's not necessarily yours. All you're doing is a polarization, is a trick of psychology. And what this would exemplify itself as is always playing, quote unquote, devil's advocate or the contrarian. And all this is doing is when you look at a belief, when you look at somebody's proposition, when you look at somebody's philosophy, somebody's argument, somebody's advice, and all you do is just flip it on its head. So you say, oh yes, but what about a scenario where it doesn't work? What about this? What about the opposite example? Now, it might seem on the surface, superficially, like it's critiquing. It might be saying, I don't like what you've established. Let me flip it on its head and try to play with that for a little bit. Again, that's not necessarily creative. It is deductive because you're taking something somebody else established and you're just flipping it on its head. So you didn't actually create anything. And what you're probably doing there is looking for the affirmation, looking for the validation, the social esteem without the risk, because there is risk involved when you establish your own philosophy. Evolutionarily, I've talked about this in the past, evolutionarily, we have inclination to agree and adhere to the beliefs and values of people around us. There's a book called Social by Matthew Lieberman who says social pain is processed in the same area of the brain as physical pain is. So in terms of embarrassment or exploitation or getting attacked or being criticized, that was evolutionarily disadvantageous. So we try to stray away from that as much as possible. And I think a contrarian or devil's advocate, somebody who takes something and just flips it on its head, that is somebody who's looking for the validation, looking for the positive effects that you have with, putting your philosophy out there without the risk involved. And I think that is actually, it's masked cowardice, I would say, but it's very meek. It's very timid to do that. And the alternative would be to say, like I said, having your own philosophy, having your own alternative to something, and it's not established from opposing something. And to establish this point, I'm going to read a paragraph or two from two separate books. The first is Genealogy of Morals by Nietzsche, and the second is Ayn Rand, the fountainhead, who was actually inspired by Nietzsche quite a bit. So it's no surprise that they are related in this subject here. So we have a section in the first section, section 10, in Genealogy of Morals, where Nietzsche says the following: the revolt of the slaves in morals begins in the very principle of resentment becoming creative and giving birth to values. A resentment experienced by creatures who, deprived as they are of the proper outlet of action, are forced to find their compensation in an imaginary revenge. He continues, the slave morality requires, as the condition of its existence, an external and objective world. I'm going to repeat that. That first sentence is very important. The slave morality requires, as the condition of its existence, an external and objective world. To employ psychological terminology, it requires objective stimuli to be capable of action at all. Its action is fundamentally a reaction. So that would be somebody who is perpetually complaining. They're taking something outside themselves. They're taking some objective stimuli to be capable of action, and they are reactive. They're saying, I don't like that. That triggers me. I'm offended by that. I disagree with that. I hate that. That's all they're doing is just reactive. They don't actually espouse. They don't create anything on their own. So in this view, the person who perpetually complains, who is always offended at something, Nietzsche would define as a psychological slave, which I would be inclined to agree. They're not. They are always reactive. They're always subject to the whims and other designs and other desires of other people. They don't live for themselves. They are living as reactive individuals instead of responsive individuals with taking objective stimuli into account and then altering their own decisions accordingly and actually creating something and saying, I don't like this, but here's what I think is better. Here's a better fit. You know what I mean? So the second thing I want to read is from Ayn Rand, like I said, greatly influenced by Nietzsche, so it's no surprise. And she says the following: that precisely is the deadliness of second-handers. They have no concern for facts, ideas, or work. They're concerned only with people. They don't ask, is this true? They ask, is this what others think is true? Not to judge, but to repeat. Not to do, but to give the impression of doing. Not creation, but show. That's an important line. Not creation, but show. Not ability, but friendship. Not merit, but pull. What would happen to the world without those who do? Think, work, produce. Those are the egotists. You don't think through another's brain, and you don't work through another's hands. When you suspend your faculty of independent judgment, you suspend consciousness. To stop consciousness is to stop life. Second-handers have no sense of reality. Their reality is not within them, but somewhere in that space which divides one human body from another. Not an entity, but a relation anchored to nothing. So that concluding statement is almost like immediately when I read Nietzsche, I thought about this, or sorry, the other way around. When I read this, I thought about that Nietzsche line. Not an entity, but a relation anchored to nothing. They are an intermediary agent. They are a secondary device. They are a placeholder. They don't have any desires of their own. They don't have anything that create on their own, whether it's a philosophy, whether it's a business, whether it could be really anything, just creation, the act of creation, the act of espousing your own ideals onto the world. These people don't do that. They perpetually complain. They are living as a reaction. They need somebody to create first in order to be offended by it or in order to criticize it. And keep in mind that it doesn't take any brevity, it doesn't take any courage, it doesn't take any intellect, it doesn't take any intelligence, it doesn't take any ambition, any discipline, any motivation, any talent, any character, any skill to criticize something or to complain about something or to be offended by something. It literally takes nothing. It takes all of those things, however, to create something. Okay, so in conclusion, I think one major application we can all leave with today is to create and not complain about things. It's okay to be dissatisfied by things in the external world. It's okay to disagree with other people. One of my favorite lines is, where all think alike, none think very, very much. So it's okay to have your own opinions. It's okay to have your own ideals. It's okay to not be completely congruent with all of your people in your life on all subjects across all domains. But don't just mindlessly be offended and express discontentment without providing an intelligent alternative. Now, if you don't have that alternative, you should probably keep your mouth closed, because it's not adding anything to the conversation. It's not adding anything to the world. And it's destructive not only on the other person, not only on their ideals, but also your own character, because you will very quickly slip into being a second-hander, as Ayn Rand says in The Fountainhead, or being a psychological slave, as Nietzsche says in Genealogy of Morals. So in conclusion, create, don't complain. Hope you find value. Thank you.